Welcome to SeaRUG again. My name is David Diarsa. I'm your host today as usual, except last month I missed it. Thank you, Alana, for filling in. I was moving, so it's a little bit messy back here. I haven't quite organized my home office yet. We're still kind of living out of boxes and finishing the moving process. It seems like it's been months, but anyway, you don't want to hear about that. Very excited today to welcome our good friends from Microsoft Resources again to sponsor this meeting. And you know the drill. I have a couple of slides here, a couple of thank yous, and then I'll get off the podium as quickly as possible. So like I said, Microsoft Resources are returning champions, and they have brought Enscape and Payette today to show us some of their work around real-time rendering in Revit, which I think will be great. Some of you are familiar with Enscape or for other products like it, and this is typically a pretty popular topic. So I'm hoping that today is no different, and we learn something new, and we got the agenda up here. You can all take a look at it. It's the same thing that was on the meetup content, so nothing too surprising here. Of course, as always, a big thank you to all of our SeaRUG sponsors for 2021. We've got a couple of new additions to the family, which is fantastic. And so far this year, we've had some really nice presentations and some really great content from new sponsors. So we really appreciate all the sponsors and that make this possible. I usually say, and I almost did there, I had to catch myself, provide us lunch. Of course, since we're online, we haven't been provided lunch in about a year, which is a bummer. But about that, I have an email in and I haven't heard yet. But the last that I knew about this is that we were going to target the month of July for being back in the library in person. Now, I don't have official confirmation of that yet. So be on the lookout for an email from me, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we're going to defer to state leadership and the Seattle Public Library in terms of what we're able to do. But I am really kind of knocking on wood here that month of July, we are able to be back in person at the Seattle Public Library, and that we can provide you with the lunch that we have been so fond of for the last few years with our vendor that provides us that. So hang tight. Hopefully that's next month, and maybe not. If it's not, maybe August or September for sure. It probably looks like it would be, but more to come on that. Big thank you, of course, as always, to the rest of the SeaRUG board members. You know who you are. We don't need to spend a lot of time here other than just, again, as always, I thank you for your input and your work. Lastly, take a look at our YouTube channel, subscribe, like. I tried to do a fairly decent job of putting up the meetings pretty quickly after they happen up onto the YouTube channel. So you can always go back, share them with colleagues, share them with friends, revisit that meeting from last year that somebody told you was great or what have you. So the more people that we have subscribed and liking the content, you know how these things work online, the more it kind of gets around and it extends our reach beyond the Seattle region, which is absolutely fantastic. So check it out if you haven't yet and give it a subscribe. And with that, I'm going to cut it out and shut up and get off the podium and pass it over to Annalisa Montenegro of Microsoft Resources, like I said, our returning champion. And Annalisa, thank you so much for being back with SeaRUG. And we always look forward to your content and your presentations. And today is no different. So I'm going to hand it over to you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, David. It's great to be back here again, and wanted to thank again the entire Seattle Revit user group for joining us in today's presentation, and also for tuning in. So I just wanted to again mention that we are going to be doing a quick introduction. We're talking about the experiencing on how the benefits of the real-time rendering in Revit is going to be presented. Sorry. I just wanted to also mention, as I mentioned, Annalisa Montenegro of Microsoft Resources. I met some of you in our previous SeaRUG presentations and last year at Tech Perspectives at the Seattle Art Museum right before we were quarantined. So glad we can do this virtual presentation at this time. And I can't wait to see you all in person, as David said, perhaps in July. Also wanted to let you know I'm joined by my team, Sofia Jaramillo, who is our account executive in Seattle and in the West Coast, as well as Miriam Schreier, who is helping us manage today's event. I am so glad we can do this presentation today with our esteemed presenters. Virtual reality has really been allowing architects and engineers to create this stunning interactive walkthroughs, which you'll see shortly, and provide realistic sense of how it's actually to experience a simulated environment. To that extent, we're actually glad that the Boston-based design firm, Payette, architects will talk to us about how they create the stunning walkthroughs and share how they do their Revit to Enscape workflow. We are joined by Payette's Director of Design Visualization, David Hamill, their visualization designer, Hassan Oretman, and the architect, Stacy Craig. And also, we are very honored to have Dan Monaghan, the business leader of Enscape, joining us today from Maryland, I believe, right?
Yes, thank you, Annalisa.
Thank you. We are a very proud Enscape partner, and again, we're glad to be bringing you today's presentations and presenters. To that extent, I wanted to kind of mention to you, for those that familiar or unfamiliar with us, we're an Autodesk Platinum partner and a proud Autodesk partner for the last 30 years. In addition, we've also partnered with numerous technology companies and offer the support as well as the resources you see here. That includes also Enscape, Bluebeam, Chaos Group V-Ray, and McNeil's Rhino. In fact, we just presented Rhino inside Revit in a previous SeaRUG meeting before. In addition to today's presentation, just want to let you know that we also host various other events coming up June 22nd. We're talking about the construction industry outlook by Dodge Data and Analytics. Go join us. According to them, it's a very good economic upturn right now for the next year and 2022 as well. In addition to that, we're talking about tips and tricks and best practices on Bluebeam Studio on June 29th. And also CAD learning. So if you're talking about not just staff hiring for your firm or onboarding and upskilling, CAD learning is actually an Autodesk publisher, and you can learn everything from Revit to the BIM 360 platform and various other things. Just also as a quick announcement, we actually are going to be recording today's webinar. We are going to be sharing it in our tech resources page. David will be sharing with you the recording on their YouTube channel in a few days. Also, just to let you know, if you're interested in learning units, we can send you a certificate or provide us with your AIA number. Just email us at marketing@microsolresources.com, and Miriam will get back to you on those. On that note, for today's presentation, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Dan. Dan,
Great.
all yours.
And then Miriam, will you click through the slides for me?
I'll do that for you, Dan.
Okay, great. So thank you, Annalisa, and thank you, David. I'm super excited to be here today with the Microsoft team and Payette to really kind of talk a little bit about how real-time rendering is improving today's building design process. And for those of you who are new to Enscape, I just have a few slides to introduce you to who we are before I turn the presentation over to Payette. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, one more. Could you go back one, please? Thank you. So when we think of real-time rendering, it's typically images like these that come to mind, right? It's these photorealistic renderings and presentations, but more subtly and perhaps even more importantly is how real-time 3D can improve today's design process. Next slide. So for visualization, it's really always been the cornerstone of the design practice. However, it's also been isolated and disconnected from the design process. In today's process, it's kind of fractured. In at some point in some project, we branch design and we create a new and separate visualization model that's really kind of disconnected. And then we use this visualization model to answer questions, but also to collect feedback. And then we have to manually coordinate what we learn back into our design process. And then, of course, we restart the cycle at the next project milestone. But why? Why does rendering and visualization have to be separate from design? You know, why can't it be integrated into our design process? So traditionally, rendering technology, it's just been very difficult. With traditional rendering technology, it can take hours and sometimes even days to get out a high quality visualization. And correctly configuring textures and materials and lighting to kind of achieve a realistic look, it's difficult, and it demands specialized know-how. And even then, it can require a lot of trial and error. As a result, in many firms, rendering and visualization is really relegated to specialists using specialty visualization software, or in some cases, it's completely subbed out. Real-time 3D is a little different. Can you go back one, Annalise? Real-time 3D is different. It's this next generation of. I'm sorry, Annalise. Can you go forward, please? This real-time 3D is different. It's this next generation of visualization technology. It's what we're doing is we're really leveraging new advances in graphics technology and hardware technology. It's fundamentally the same rendering technology that you'll find in today's high-end video games. And while the results are incredibly impressive, more importantly, the results are instant and they're very easy to achieve. In fact, it's this kind of speed and simplicity that are the cornerstones to Enscape. I mean, quite simply, Enscape is the easiest way to go from something like this to something like this. Now, for us, this concept of ease in use and speed, it's not just jargon. These are really kind of truths that are derived from the fact that Enscape is a plugin. It's not a separate rendering program, as you'll see. And unlike other rendering programs, you don't have to exchange files or manually sync models. Enscape natively plugs into your favorite modeling program, and it integrates into its interface and into your BIM workflows. In fact, in many ways, Enscape is simply just another rendering mode. It's not a standalone program that you need to learn. In fact, if you've ever added a light source or a texture in Revit, you already know how to use Enscape. The results are just a little easier and faster and way more impressive. So let's take a quick look. Annalise, can I ask you to please click on the image? Oh, can you click on the slide, please? Thanks. So the animation's playing a little slowly, but fundamentally what we're looking at here is after you install Enscape, it installs a ribbon in your Revit interface. And so it's completely integrated into the Revit workflow. To start Enscape, you simply click the start button, and then Enscape will launch a new window where you can see your models fully rendered. Any textures and lights that you've assigned in Revit are automatically picked up in Enscape. And using the W, A, S, and D keys and the mouse, we can begin to immediately explore a project in 3D. To find specific views, you can use your saved 3D views in Enscape to navigate around the model. And then your saved views will not only change your view, but will also show any visibility settings that you might have saved. Because Enscape and Revit are integrated, now BIM modeling and visualization can be simultaneous. They don't have to be separate. You don't have to stop design in order to visualize in another software program. Really now visualization can become part of your Revit workflow, your design workflow. And in fact, in many offices, you'll find Revit open on one monitor and Enscape open on the other. And it allows the architect to work back and forth between the visualization and the BIM model. And it allows architects to instantly see how their design decisions will affect a building's architecture and construction and really help them get to decision points faster. So the results are amazing. So with Enscape, we can create still renderings in 4K resolution. We can generate 360 panos. We can create path animations, and I'll drop a link into the chat with an example of a path animation. And then also we can do, with one click, we can kind of take your Revit models and we can experience them in virtual reality. So that's just a quick introduction to Enscape and kind of who we are, some of the benefits that we offer. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Payette and really have them walk us through how they're using Enscape to improve their design process.
Thank you, Dan. And I wanted to introduce the Payette team: David Hamill, Hassan Uretman, and also Stacy Craig. David, all yours.
Thank you. And I wanted to also say thank you to everyone for inviting us to come and share some of the work that we've been doing. I'm a member of the visualization team inside Payette. So I'm going to just kind of go through a very quick introduction into sort of the story, the quick story about how we got into, we were connected with Enscape. And then I brought an example of, how Enscape's kind of helped us in the various types of deliverables that you can actually get out of Enscape. And then I'll hand it off to Hassan, who's also a member of the group, and he's going to share some of the animations that we've recently worked on. And then Stacy is an architect on the architect side of our work, and she's done a lot of Enscape work with Revit, and she's got a lot of stuff that she's going to share. So I'm going to try to rush through this. We started using VR 5 or 6 years ago. And that was just before the Rift and the Vive were released, and we started using Unity, and this is sort of a look at how our process getting our designs into Unity looks like. Revit in particular, it may be different now. We haven't done it in a while, but Revit in particular, there were many steps that needed to happen, including sometimes taking Revit, an FBX into Rhino. We have a script that we'll run to try to clean up some things, or if we have to clean up the model at all, or simplify the geometry. We will then bring it into Max, and then through that process, we actually separate the model by material. So if people aren't familiar, Unity doesn't like to have thousands of just separate objects, so you have to group these things, and we learned that the hard way. It took us a little while to realize that how a game engine works. And if you click to the next slide. So this is the great workflow that we now have with Enscape. So obviously it's, I'm only showing the 3 softwares that we use, and we're primarily actually Rhino and Revit. But it's phenomenal to have just the one-click into VR path. It's, to be honest, the visualization group itself, we don't actually use VR. It's just, we teamed up with the IT department way back when and introduced the firm to VR, and it quickly became a sort of a favorite in-house design tool, sharing it with clients, complex designs that we needed to go over. So having Enscape allows the project teams to handle everything themselves now. It's probably benefit to mention that even during COVID, we kept the VR running. We instituted safety precautions. We have a couple different Vive headsets, so each user would actually clean after they're used. They would clean the headsets and the controllers. They'd wipe them down. We have this UV box that they would throw them in there, and we'd rotate headsets so no one was sort of doubling up. And then we have these eye masks for the headsets to sit on for a little added safety, which seemed to work. Next slide. And then beyond VR, little bit to my surprise, we found that we actually did use all the extra deliverables that Enscape had to offer, including cardboard and panos, and the project teams often run live walkthroughs. We have VR laptops that can handle pretty much anything we're throwing at Enscape, and they'll sit with the client and run live walkthroughs. And then also we've been doing a lot of animation work, and Hassan's going to share some of that stuff. We actually completed an 8.5-minute fundraising movie for a university that we would never have been able to deliver that much content before, like a real-time render like Enscape. So we're pretty thankful. Next slide. The example I brought is this healthcare fit-out mock-up that one of our project teams put this together. This was a pretty big meeting with the client, users, some other important people that needed to be here. But what it is the actual space. They sort of mocked up some of the walls, and we brought in some XR technology to help tell the story. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is sort of a plan of that space, and this is an MRI suite. So they actually had, I forget if it was a real MRI or if they did some sort of mock-up, but they had some stuff there. You can see in the top left we had a full VR station set up. So if somebody wanted to sort of immerse themselves fully in the actual 3D model, they could do that. The numbers are actually indicating different QR codes that were spread around the space. And if you click to the next slide, you'll see a video that shows people using the QR codes with their laptops and their phones. This was a wildly successful meeting. The biggest surprise to me were on multiple occasions, I saw groups of 2 or 3 people together sort of walking around getting all excited anytime they would bump into a QR code and scan it, and they'd be able to see what was happening. But what you saw there was the gentleman actually had a live model. So it was, I believe we used Unity to create that one, but it was a live model where you just scanned the QR code and it would load the full model into the iPad, and you could walk around the space in the same, and see live what the actual rendering would look like. But everything else was Enscape panos, and that's an Enscape VR session. And then now I'll hand it off to Hassan.
Hello everyone, I am Hassan Redman, and I've been working in Payette as a visualization designer for more than 2 years. And as a designer, I support the design teams with 3D modeling, rendering, and with various design tasks. And in addition to that, I also work on R&D projects like creating computational design tools and parametric scripts to make the design process more efficient. And today I will share some of the visual work that we have done by using Enscape. So next slide, please. This is a project that we designed for a large state school, and the project actually consists of 2 buildings, and I will name them as Building 1 and Building 2 because the client wants to keep that information confidential for now. So the L-shaped building on the right is Building 1. The rectangular one with triangular skylights and facing the central quad is Building 2. The project also includes the redesign of the landscape of the quad in between the buildings. And I will show short clips trimmed from the original video like this one to keep the presentation short. Also, I had to compress the videos to avoid any technical difficulties during the presentation. So the original video quality is much better than this actually. Enscape has much better results. And so we structured the animation with 3 different primary sequences. The exterior shots of the buildings, the interior shots of Building 1 and Building 2. You will see some short video clips from each sequence in the following slides. And as you can see in the previous slide, can we actually go back to the previous one? And yeah, and add one more, please. The first one. As you can see in this slide, our animation starts with an aerial shot composed of our building models, context building, scanned by a drone and imported as a textured mesh, and Enscape assets like trees and people. Next slide. When we create an animation with Enscape, we usually tend to create a continuous animation path that travels through every single space that we want to show. But after gaining some experience with different projects, we think that it is better to create different animation paths that are simpler and shorter using other camera motions. For example, in this shot, the camera path is parallel to the building facade and it slowly slides to the left with a camera target facing the building. Instead of telling the whole story with a single camera path, like imitating a person who walks in the project site, combining different camera paths like this helps us to create a more cinematic animation. Next one, please. And sometimes we choose view angles that emphasize different aspects of a design. For instance, by selecting this view angle, we try to show large timber mullions on the front facade, as well as the serrated copper panels framed by the brick wall on the left side. It is also essential to eliminate anything that diverts attention from the building. Therefore, we usually do not place any Enscape people or any eye-catching vegetation in the image's foreground. Normally, Enscape asset library is so rich with different objects, trees, and furniture, and it makes you tend to show so many other things in a single image. But still, it is always important to limit your selection to create a focus hierarchy in the picture. Next one. For interior shots, we do the opposite. We usually prefer to add more people to make it look more lifelike. And again, thanks to Enscape's diverse asset library, it is effortless to do this. Another critical detail in this clip is that we always use different lighting settings for the interior shots because naturally interior spaces tend to be darker than exterior shots, so it's important to adjust that. Next slide. We also adjust the material settings of glass for different interior views. For instance, we reduce the reflectivity of the glass in this view to show the landscape around the building and create a continuity between interior and exterior spaces. There are also some other tricks that we learned by experimenting. Like, for example, if we think that an interior space is still dark even after changing the visual settings, like instead of using artificial lights to fix that issue, we sometimes apply a material to the ceiling that has a very small percentage of emissivity, and it slightly increases the overall brightness in the space. Next slide. So this is the high base space of Building 2, designed to serve as a structures and materials laboratory for academic research. As you can see, there are so many different architectural elements like yellow cranes, perforated concrete walls, and exposed steel structures. And for spaces like this, it is very important to pick the perfect view angle to show different architectural elements at the same time. And for the lighting of the space, we took the advantage of the building's design and used skylights to create the sunbeam effect on the windows. And in a traditional rendering engine, it actually takes a little more time and experience to test this kind of specific effects. But with Enscape, it is very easy to change the sun angle and see its impact in real time. Next slide. Another helpful feature of Enscape is that it allows you to choose a two-point perspective camera. We usually prefer using two-point perspective for interior shots because for spaces like this one, for example, a space with so many vertical elements like the mullions, table legs, and marker boards, it is even more important to use a two-point perspective to perceive this space correctly. It also facilitates having a more accurate understanding of the non-orthogonal objects like these study pods with colored interiors or the ceiling with triangular skylight openings. Next slide. As you saw at the beginning of the video, these two engineering buildings at the center and the orange bridge connecting them with the rest of the campus are designed for Northeastern University in Boston. The contextual information was crucial for this project, and therefore project team asked us to create an aerial animation like the previous project, and we used a large context model with textures. Because this model has a very desaturated color palette and the project team asked for a specific atmosphere, we used an HDRI image to create this particular lighting and look. So Enscape also allows to use HDRI images and create a more specific lighting effect. Next slide, please. And compared to the previous examples I showed, we created this animation using a single animation path that starts from a higher location and slowly spirals down and moves closer to the building. Again, I couldn't show the entire animation, but because of the limited time, but I think this short clip gives an idea about the path we used. Next slide. So when we work on post-processing in After Effects or similar software, we sometimes add photorealistic renderings to transition between different views. Next slide. Actually, this project that we designed for the University of Pittsburgh is a better example of this technique I mentioned, because we tried to mesh the last frame of the animation and the rendering more precisely. It is also possible to match them perfectly, but it requires more effort, especially if you did not plan to use this technique at the beginning. And later, it can be challenging to match the camera parameters between different softwares. Next slide, please. And when we use high-end renderings as transitions between different Enscape shots, we usually prefer to create a more cartoony style using Enscape settings. And this technique allows us to create a contrast between the still images and the animation, and it makes it more interesting for the viewers. Next slide, please. And to achieve that cartoony look, we use very simple materials and textures and eliminate unnecessary details in the model and increase the thickness of the outlines. Doing this also helps the viewer better to understand the geometry and the boundary of the images. Next slide. And finally, we usually finish our animations with a camera shot that is moving away from the building. These final shots are generally the ones that are remembered most by the viewer, and therefore for the last shots we try to select the most exciting view of the building that tells the most about the design. And in parallel, we also focus a considerable amount of our efforts on the photorealistic rendering that we show in the last frame of the animation. So I tried to summarize our overall workflow with Enscape within our design visualization group at Payette. And now I will pass the time to Stacy to talk about her experience in her design team. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Krieg. I'm an architect at Payette, and I am here to talk with you about Enscape workflow, specifically as an architect and a Revit user. In our office, we use different modeling softwares, as David was explaining, but we primarily use Revit for our documentation within architecture. So by schematic design, we have a Revit model going, and our use of Enscape really starts there, if not earlier in the design process. So we start using Enscape early on, and it's really been a great tool for us with our clients and within the teams ourselves. So the two means of, let's see, actually, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. The two means of visualization interface that we use as architects are generally the VR headset and our computers. Next slide, please. So with the headset, I would say probably our top three uses have been for client walkthroughs, and that's similar to the way that David had shown you a little earlier on. with that animation, also with individual walkthroughs, an individual architect or designer going over to the VR station and using the headset themselves to walk around, and also for internal team walkthroughs. So, and each of these is kind of color coded from a lighter gray to a darker gray, or almost a black, black being kind of the one that I've found, at least, that I've used most often in the office. So, and going to the other form, which is via, sitting at your computer, having Revit open on your screen, on your desktop or laptop, and also running Enscape. We use Enscape and Revit to export walkthroughs for our client, for internal team walkthroughs, to export renders for clients, to export renders for our internal discussions, and for individual walkthroughs or fly-throughs. Next, please. So just to talk pretty briefly about the headset and the way that I know at least I've been using it within our office. There are generally 3 different modes, as I was saying. So there's the individual walkthrough, the team walkthrough, and the client walkthrough. So the individual walkthrough, personally haven't been using as much these days, just because of the pandemic. Another reason for that, that I found from the architecture side, is that there is a lot of ease in using Enscape at my computer. So if I have Revit open on my computer on one screen, such as, for example, as Daniel was explaining, and then Enscape on my other screen, it's really easy for me to go back and forth between the two, pause Enscape, make a few adjustments in Revit, then hit play again in Enscape, and then have those live results. So I would say as an individual, I have not been using the VR headset as much. One way, I would say probably the one that we use it for the most would be the internal team walkthroughs. And we've used that within my team a lot for essentially checking in with each other. We work on large projects, so we have multiple team members working in our Revit model. And so Enscape and doing these kind of team walkthroughs has been a really helpful tool for us to kind of check in with each other, check in, see what the space is actually looking like, for everyone to kind of catch themselves up to date. And it's been great, especially at milestones within projects, because we can all as a team go to the VR station. One person puts on the headset, walks around, and the rest of us can take notes of, like, for example, oh, that should not be there, that's too big. Do we really want to do that there? So it's been a great way of real-time note-taking and observing what's in our model. So, and another way, though, that we've used probably not as much, from my experience at least, has been with client walkthroughs. So you will see a picture we have, that's a project that I've been working on, and we did use this early on in the process with the client, and I think it was especially helpful for the client to get acquainted to the project, to the site, to walk around on it, and understand the initial massing. And if we can go to the next slide. So I would say I do primarily personally use Enscape the most while I'm seated at my computer. And if we go to the next slide, I would say the way that I personally use Enscape the most is via exporting renders. Enscape is a phenomenal tool for exporting renders, sending out visual images to get feedback on. It's extremely quick to render. We're talking like, I don't know, two to 5 seconds maybe to export a render, versus within other render softwares, which, as a lot of you may know, take quite some time, especially if you want to get a high resolution image. And also, if you are not as advanced of a renderer, I'd say Enscape is a great tool for you. It's super simple. The settings are very easy to understand. And the initial kind of base settings within Revit are also great. So oftentimes we don't even have to adjust too many settings to get a good quality environment for our renders and exports. So these are just 2 images. That image on the left is just a direct export from Enscape. And we use this a lot of times for quick decision making, saying, hey, you know, this is what the space looks like. Are we okay with that? And then we can make comments internally as a team. Also then, we have used Enscape for external renders for our clients. So, you know, that might just mean, hey, we'll bring it into Photoshop a bit and go from there. But it really exports quality renders, which I know our clients have found very helpful in understanding the space as we present it to them. If we go to the next slide. Another way that I've used it is to, again, also sometimes more so internally, but also with the client, is that oftentimes, obviously in architecture, you'll have to work through different design options and studies to understand and discuss which are the best options for the project and for the team. So this is just an example of a simple kitchenette, but we did a study looking at 3 different layouts with different refrigerator types. And this was a really great way to export these images, get that out there to the team, and so that we could get quick feedback. So it's part of that kind of that iterative feedback loop, and it's been a really helpful tool on the architecture side. If we go to the next. And so as Daniel was explaining, you can also walk through Enscape, and you've seen that also with the animations from Hassan as well. So this has been an extremely helpful tool on the architecture side to just kind of sometimes leave Enscape open. I can walk around the model, see things that that I might miss if I'm only looking at a floor plan or an RCP. There's always that interstitial zone between those, and there are always details that you might miss when you're trying to visualize the space and work through it. So if we go to the next slide. And this is an animation. We can play this pretty quickly. I think Daniel showed probably a better example of this, but this was just in one of our models, starting to open up Enscape. And this is, you know, me just doing it very quickly, trying to move around the space. And it might be a little slow, but trying to move around the space and kind of check on things as I'm going. So this is an example of one way that we use it. And this is me seated at my computer, probably not the most eloquent movements, but you can see this as obviously a tool. And this is a tool that's helpful for us, not necessarily always as a presentation grade image or animation. So, and I think that's about it. We can skip the rest of that. Thank you. And so another way that we've used it, and from our computers and not the VR headset, is to record walkthroughs for a client. And we can go to the next slide. This animation in particular is from early on in our design phase for a project. This is a single studio space, and we wanted to, our client was out of state, and we wanted to send them an update of the space to let them know, kind of refresh them on the past meeting minutes, the notes, say this is where the space is right now, kind of pull all these things together, all of the feedback that we had received from them, and send this over to them. So this was a kind of a great tool for us to update the client, especially in a space. Oftentimes there is not just one still shot that can really describe the whole space for you. So we did an animation and recorded that as a walkthrough for this particular animation. And I think we can go to the next slide. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to go through a few settings that we've used. As we were saying earlier, settings in Enscape are pretty great. They're very user-friendly. I think you probably need very minimal to zero background and knowledge of rendering. I think as architects, most of the time we do have that background, especially as with someone who studied photography, and or honestly, just who has used Instagram. There are a lot of lighting settings and kind of different, I would say almost filter settings that you can customize throughout Enscape. And so I'll just go through a couple of those with you guys. So one of them is line weights. You can control the line weights. This is super simple, and it's just called outlines within settings. And this has been nice to customize. I generally keep my line weights down to a pretty minimal setting, but I think, you know, it's a great option to be able to play with that as a variable, especially if you are trying to portray a project or an image as a bit more kind of not underdeveloped, but a little kind of schematic in its development, not as maybe refined, and maybe this is a little earlier on in the project and you don't want to give as much of a finalized finish. I think that can be really helpful, so it takes on a bit more of a cartoony look, but I think having that ability to adjust those is really helpful. If we go to the next slide. Another setting that I've enjoyed using is just the mode, setting the mode of the image. So you'll see those image examples to the right of kind of your typical normal, how you would see the project in real life versus a white background or white mode, polystyrol, or light view. This has been really helpful, especially when, again, we were trying to portray a project as a little less developed and we did not want to use as many details. We did not want to show materiality. We were earlier on in our design process, so more so schematic design, and we really wanted to focus more so on the forms and less so the materiality. So, you know, just a couple of clicks and we were able to do that within Enscape. So that was really helpful for us. And if we go to the last one, this is an animation, and this is essentially just kind of taking a quick look at a couple of the environmental variables. So this is just inside a building looking out. You can use different preset backgrounds. You can also upload your own background. And of course, there are also the different environmental settings, clouds, sunlight. You can customize all of that, which is really great within Revit and Enscape. And this next part is a little slow, but this is me kind of just panning through the different time of day, which you can control as well, which is great. So you can get a better sense too of orientation on a site, which has been really helpful, especially trying to understand Eastern and Western spaces and how they would be affected with glazing and such throughout. So this will take us all the way out to, I think, nighttime, where the sun is down. And so then you'll see also the lights start to appear a bit more too, which is great as well. So the lighting of your Revit lighting is built in and will reflect in the Enscape renders. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Stacy. That's excellent. And I know, as you know, we have a lot of different questions here coming up too. Some of them are, well, there's one from Andre. They wanted to find out, do you have an experience in comparing real-time engines like Enscape to Vantage, which is a Chaos Group 1 or Unreal? They just wanted to find out what your experience was. And I don't know who wants to take this, Hassan, David, or Stacy.
I actually have tested out Vantage a little. For it to take the place of something like and I don't even look at it as taking the place, but for us to utilize it with the max work that we're doing and the VRA work that we're doing. The first comment, I think I even wrote this on their forums, was I just wasn't a fan yet of the way that they have their cameras set up and that kind of thing. But I actually have started testing out Vantage already.
Sounds good. Thanks. This Hassan, do you have something to add to this, or are you ready for the next question?
For the real-time rendering engines, my experience is limited with Enscape, but I also use like traditional rendering engines like V-Ray and KeyChef, that kind of things. But so far, Enscape is the only example of real-time rendering for me. Thank you.
And Dan, do you want to address that, or are you good?
I mean, I have not experienced it firsthand, so I know kind of from a technology point of view some differences, but no, I think that every software has its advantages and disadvantages. I think as kind of Stacy showed in today's presentation, I think the advantage of Enscape is the integration and then just how easy it is to get out quality results.
Sounds great. And then a follow-up question too, they wanted to find out, do you encounter any apprehension? You showed how you presented this to your client. What's been the experience? Are they prone to using VR? Do they want to stay away? Combination of both. Do you have any anecdotes from clients' experience?
On the client side, yes and no. Usually, I mean, at least early on when VR was, in the industry really new, it would always take somebody to put the headset on first before, more sort of folks in the client on the side would want to use it. We actually had that same question when we first started. We didn't know if the architects were going to take to it. We honestly didn't know if you were going to get architects to put this headset on and walk around and look goofy. But the interesting thing that we sort of found is, anytime you throw an architect in VR for their project, they go crazy. You can put them on somebody else's project and it's just a project. But as soon as you put them inside there, and it was instant, I'm talking like 6 years ago when we first started doing this. As soon as you put them inside their building, that's it. They just start designing. They're like analyzing why is the height of this, and what's going on here? Why is this detailed? It was amazing to watch architects for the first time enter into VR like that.
That sounds great. Great question too. And speaking of, we actually do have some questions for the audience. One of them is just, are you currently using VR right now? Are you using virtual reality? So we want to launch the poll and ask, so yes, is it an important part of your workflow? To whether you use it from time to time, or you're thinking about using it, or I don't see my firm using it. So we're just going to give a few more minutes, or a minute, before we close the poll. I'd be interested to hear what you think. Closing it shortly, I think. Okay, great. So it looks like actually 52% only use it from time to time. That's interesting. Followed by 24%, we're thinking about using it. Okay, 16%, yes, it's an important part of our workflow. And 8%, they don't feel that it's something that they or their firm are using VR. Interesting perspective. Does anybody want to address that, or?
I just have a question for kind of David's team. So during COVID, when it was hard to get together physically, did you ever use VR to send clients either the VR headset so they could walk around the designs themselves, or was it always narrated or curated by your team?
We actually, nobody was allowed in our office except for us. So there was no in-person meetings during COVID at all. So the VR use was strictly for folks who were in the office. And to be honest, you're talking about a handful of folks, at any given day, at certain times. At least like last summer when we were kind of starting to try to get the office working, and we had VR running, and we came up with the different safety precautions. You're really only talking a couple people were going to jump in anyway. It wasn't like a large group really. So.
Interesting. I have a follow-up question from Colby. Are there any good workflows for designing for views for the real world? I guess somebody was mentioning, let's say you want to position a window and frame a view like of a mountain. Do you ever use Enscape or VR for doing that?
As a design process?
I guess it's a design process, yeah.
I'm not sure if Stacy would comment on that. We've had renderings where we just move, we model them out and just move it right in place. So we sometimes don't worry about that. We're just trying to get it to the way we want. But I'm not sure if Stacy has any comments on something like that.
You know, we have used Enscape and specific views for our projects. We've uploaded background images, so to try and align those so that views were accurate, looking outside of our building, looking outside of a curtain wall or a window. So we have used it. I wouldn't say I've used it that often, but it's definitely a helpful tool and can be used. And I can see that becoming very important.
Sounds great. Thank you for answering that. And Burton wanted to find out how much flexibility do you have with lighting types, adding filters to change light color, IES files? What about theater lighting and artistic lighting?
We've used IES files in our regular renders. We haven't done some of that stuff, I don't think, with Enscape ourselves.
Okay, that's interesting. And then I just have a quick question now for the audience as well. So I know some of you had mentioned that you use VR from time to time, and some of you said, yes, it's an important part of your workflow. Just curious to find out how many of you are using Enscape. And I know this was a poll that we were supposed to ask before the presentation, but I'm still here interested to find out. Not yet, you're new to Enscape, you've been using Enscape for a while, or you're an expert. And the poll is still coming in. Just get in a few minutes. Okay, so it looks like it stopped here now. It looks like 35% not yet, 23% you're new. Sorry, 35% not yet. Another 35% said that they've been using Enscape for a while. 23% said that they're new, and 8% that they're an expert. So we have some experts here as well. And meanwhile, I don't have any other questions here. So David, I know you had asked the team over here. Do you have any questions for them before we wrap up, or?
No questions specifically. You covered some of the things that I usually think about with visualization, especially real time, is how many clients kind of get distracted by materiality. I think Stacy, you kind of alluded to that. That's something that I have found in the past, right? You want them to focus on the feeling of the space, and they get hung up on the granite being the wrong choice. But that's an artifact of visualization in general, not necessarily real time. And you alluded to that. But no, more than a question, I just wanted to really thank you, Annalisa, for. And I've been pushing to bring, user content, and I want to really thank the Payette team and Hassan, David, and Stacy. I know that, you have nothing to gain other than showcasing your wonderful work this afternoon. So for you to spend an hour with us, it's I really appreciate it, and I've loved seeing your presentation, and I just can't thank you enough. Yeah, absolutely. That's just it's a huge thank you to the Payette team, and of course, Dan with Enscape as well. And Annalisa, as always, look forward to Microsoft Resources presentations, and this is obviously no exception. So really big thank you to all of you, and really sincerely for taking the time and being with us this afternoon. And with that, I think we can wrap it up. We're right at the time. So again, a huge thank you. Just can't say it enough. We will we'll put out some information about whether we're going to be online or whether we manage to get together at the library again next month. But July 21st is our next meeting, and we will see what happens. So I'll keep you posted. And again, thank you so much. Can't say that enough times. Thank you to the Payette team, and thank you to everybody for joining us and watching this presentation. We'll put it up on YouTube, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.